Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. So with that in mind, let's jump right in to this week's episode of Becoming Something.
What's up, podcast world? It's your boy JP in the podcast studio with my friend Nate.
What's up, JP?
What's up? What's Asbury?
To be honest, I'm wearing a polo.
I'm gonna get to you. I'm gonna make sure.
Just making sure.
Guys, hold on.
I feel like you focused really quickly with
before
him.
Nate and I go
right
any
here.
before Nate and I go any further in the conversation, I need to also make you aware that Kathy Davidson is here too.
Hi.
Yes, so great
What's
to
up?
see you.
How are you?
Yes, I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
Now back to your shirt.
Okay, so I'm wearing a Asbury polo. It's a school in Kentucky that I know nothing about, but my friends went there and they just gave me free
Nate
gear.
only
I mean, that
wears
thing
free
is like
clothes.
on blast, I feel like. It's not like the little fish logo you
I
usually
know.
have. It's like across your chest.
So it's also like it's like some sort of Christian university, but it's
It's a
like
seminary.
Wesleyan or something. So if it's not like good theologically,
Oh my
I'm not gonna
gosh.
back it up. But I think it's good.
But you're just
so,
gonna wear the shirt.
Yeah, well, I think it's
Guys,
solid.
you heard it here first. He thinks it's good.
Yeah.
This is how Nate did announcements on Sunday.
Oh
He goes,
my God.
Hey,
That was so bad.
he said, do you remember what he said? Hey, JP, speaking of passion, and so it's sometime in January, so make sure you save that date.
It was so bad.
No, he said it's January something.
Yep.
So make sure you save that date.
I think you
It's
said
like,
I think.
What date do we say?
Everybody knows when passion is. It's like
Except
for you.
It's like the second day of the year.
Everybody except for you.
That was
That's
bad.
amazing.
So am I going to Passion? How is this going to work
Yeah,
out?
do we get to go with you?
Are
you taking us?
I told everyone that I'm
It
going.
doesn't sound like he wants us to go.
No, I bet it's all three of us. I'm sure they only asked me because you guys.
My life's goal has been to meet Louis Giglio. So if you could make that happen,
Yeah.
it would just be
You
like.
should maybe have better life goals. I
No,
think
that's a big life
I'm just
goal.
saying he
Hey,
seems
he's-
Hey,
great,
Louis,
but
she didn't
like,
mean it.
No,
He's
I'm
like
just
a Baylor
saying.
legend. So it's like all of my favorite things all wrapped
Guys,
up in
You
one.
shouldn't idolize people, is what
Hey,
I'm saying.
I've got this song on repeat.
Yeah.
Use This Gospel.
Oh my
DJ
gosh.
Khaled.
Oh.
DJ Khaled. It's got Eminem, who's rapping about true story. Now, this is absolutely true. When I heard him come in and start talking about the Good Shepherd and Jesus, and I literally in my car cried because I prayed for Eminem to become a Christian.
Oh.
And so,
Wait, he's rapping about Jesus?
have you not heard it?
I heard it.
Kathy.
I didn't know it was Eminem. Matt
Kathy.
played it for me last night.
You thought it was NF or what?
I don't know any rappers'
thought it was-
names. I
you
just
thought it was Lecrae?
like Lecrae, yeah.
For what it's worth, we were having this conversation on our staff group text. I think.
It's Eminem.
Really?
Oh, it was the
Eminem.
guys
Do you have
group
one
text.
without me?
Yeah, it was
Oh
actually
my
the guys
gosh!
group text.
Who else is on
So
there?
here's the deal. Be so listeners, this is a big deal. So like a musical legend is going to be on the podcast today. Some people are like, is he Christian or is he not? Kanye West.
No, not Kanye. It's his cousin. Matthew West.
West.
Oh, we're having Matthew West.
Matthew West.
Oh, I heard Kanye was on the pod
dude, it's
today.
Matthew
Well,
West.
this
Read
is
your emails
honestly
carefully.
even better for me.
Matthew West. Bring him on.
Me and Matthew go way
What's
back.
up, Matthew West?
Wow, here he is.
He's
Looks
like that's
just
the
like
worst.
Kanye.
That's the worst introduction to
No.
any
The
podcast
worst.
ever.
I bet you get it all the time. Like, how many times a day do you hear that dumb joke?
Are you related to Kanye?
Well, it's the sound of all your listeners collectively being disappointed when you
No.
clarified. I do get that quite often.
Yeah.
but
Sorry.
Here's why we feel the freedom to do that, and I mean this because our listeners would much rather hear from you
Yes.
than Kanye. I'm
Yeah,
confident
right.
of it. I believe it. I believe it.
Well, I'm honored to be here regardless, and I'm sorry that Kanye couldn't be here. I'm happy to fill in. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
But could you get him here next
Oh
week?
my
Like, is he?
Yeah, I got
You, is he in the cell phone? I mean,
We're
like,
not
let's-
related.
Oh,
We
okay,
are
not related. All right, okay, all right.
Her family
I
was
I know we look a
strong.
lot
Yeah.
alike, but we're not related.
Yeah.
I'm
Who is
sorry.
like the most famous music person you've ever been around? Because I know you go to the Grammys and all that stuff. So
Or who's the most famous person in your cell phone?
Ooh.
Wow.
Oh, that's a good
Let's play
question.
this game.
As we
Well,
like to
the
call
first thought that popped into my head was when you asked the most before the phone question was I was at the American Music Awards
Gosh, that's so cool.
and had a 15-minute conversation with Billy Ray Cyrus.
Shut up!
Let's go.
That's awesome.
And
That
he
is
never took
awesome.
his sunglasses off the whole time.
Yeah, let's go. They might have been prescription.
But-
Sometimes I
but-
do
What do you
that
even
in the
talk
mall.
about with Billy
Their
Ray?
prescription.
Well, what's crazy is I wrote a song that he recorded. He was making a gospel record years ago after like Achy Breaky Heart
Yeah.
made his career go nuts. He did it. He's like, I want to sing about Jesus. And so he recorded this song I wrote, but we had never met. And so I walked up to him at the American Music Awards. I was like, hey, Billy, my name is, and I told him I wrote that song. He started singing it to me
Yeah.
Aw.
with his sunglasses on. He's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, man, we need to get together. We need to do something. And then, like, he just walked away. And
Well,
I'm like,
But he
no.
meant it. He
But
meant
then
it.
He's
at
gonna
that
call
same
you any day
awards
now.
show, I had this guy in front of me who had all these chains on his neck. And I was like, who is that guy? And somebody's like, that's 2 Chainz. I was like, oh, that's why.
It's-
He's okay. So I sat next to 2 Chainz, but I didn't like talk to 2 Chainz.
Wow.
But it's confusing because he has more than 2 chains.
He had more than 2
That's
chains.
why
I'm
I'm
like,
how are you
why-
supposed to know who it is?
Yeah,
I love it.
no,
So-
exactly.
You got a book coming out, The God Who Stays, and I do want to dive into that. I've followed you for a number of reasons, and this is true. You're like his biggest fan.
Oh, yeah.
This is totally true. I was just telling them before you popped on. You're one of my like top 5 most listened to people ever.
Serious?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not Kanye. Come on, dude.
No. So I
I'm
didn't-
sure not
Bro,
Kanye.
I didn't-
Look at this shirt. Look at this shirt and tell me Kanye. That
I
doesn't scream
didn't.
Kanye.
I didn't have a Kanye phase like in middle school. Like truly, I just remember putting my headphones on and listening to like history. Next thing you know,
Yeah.
like
Oh wow.
something to say.
Okay.
Like I'm a long time
Hey,
Matthew West fan.
I
Thank you.
listened.
That means a lot.
I listened to you on the way to high school. That song "Happy" was like the go-to, get me pumped up in the morning song.
Dang,
that's-
that was my first record ever.
Yeah,
That's
I'm a
crazy.
little older than Nate. Yeah.
I
You're
love
bringing
it.
me back. That's
Let's
awesome.
go.
Well, that means a lot, and I'm super thrilled to be on the show today
Yeah,
too.
man.
I was telling you before we started recording, like I've been seeing these clips from your podcast showing up on my feed, and so I've actually been like watching you before I even knew I was going to get booked on your show. And I was joking. It's like the algorithm knew I was going to
Yes.
come on here. But I love what you guys are doing. I love what you're talking about. And I'm just thrilled to be able to be part of this conversation with y'all today. So
They're
That's
always
awesome.
they're always listening. You know, the iPhone's always listening. If they know,
That's
if they, and they
right.
see your calendar, and if becoming something's on the calendar, it's gonna start popping up.
they
in the
knew
feed.
it. They knew it. I
So,
love it.
Like, tell me the name, like The God Who Stays. So this is the book, The God Who Stays. I want you guys to pick it up. You're about to hear why as we continue to have the conversation. But why that name?
Well, it was March 12th of 2020. I was in a city called Trenton, New Jersey, and we were getting ready for a concert in the arena downtown. And they called us together a couple hours before the show to tell us that the city of Trenton was going on lockdown, and our concert was canceled.
Wow.
And so they actually said they canceled the whole tour as well. And so, like all of us, we were kind of thrown into a panic. And I remember getting online to try to book a flight to get home to my family because they had said maybe even the airports were going to shut down, right? So I booked a flight from the Philadelphia airport back to Nashville, which was about an hour from the arena where I was. So I had to get an Uber. It wound up being a very expensive Uber to drive me from Trenton, New Jersey to Philly.
Wow.
I got in the back seat of this Uber. And to be honest with you, for the first 20 minutes or so, I was kind of like, I was panicking in the back seat. Like it was just a tsunami of fear coming over me. Like, what's going to happen? Is my family okay? I'm getting on a plane. Is the airport going to shut down? What's happening? And all of us were going through all that. But literally about 30 minutes into the drive, this song came on the radio of the Uber driver's car. And it happened to be my song, The God
Whoa.
Who Stays. And so I'm sitting in the back seat going, all right, God's got my attention now. But that wasn't the only thing. I noticed the Uber driver, who was from a third world country, he was singing every word of my song along with me on the radio, having no idea I was in the back seat.
Wow.
So weird.
So, I was like, what is going on? So I'm like, all right, he doesn't know I'm in the back seat. I'm just going to start singing. So I sang with him thinking, well, maybe he'll recognize that my voice sounds similar.
He's like,
And we
it's a
did-
little pitchy.
Like, let's just let him sing.
No, true story. So we sang it together. I'm like, "You're the God who stays." We get to the end of the song, and I leaned forward. I said, "Hey, man, how'd you think I sounded?" And he goes, "Not so good, not so good." And I was like,
come on.
That's awesome.
so I was like, I wasn't expecting him to say. I thought he was
Right.
going to be like, "Oh, you're the guy,"
Yeah.
and I was like, I didn't
Man,
sound
that
good.
auto tune, man.
I know. Dude, he goes, he's like, "It's not your fault though." I said, "Why is that?" He's like, "Cause you're not professional like him on the radio."
Oh,
Wow, that's amazing.
This is the best story ever, and that's
Yeah.
why you gotta buy this book.
Well, this wound up being like the inception of the book because I was joking with him. We started talking. I learned his name was Arthur, and for the rest of the drive to the airport, the craziest thing happened. I stopped. I wasn't panicking about what was going on outside that car. I was talking to Arthur, the Uber driver, and he started telling me. And I asked him, I was like, "How come you like that song?" And I still didn't tell him who I was. I never did. I got out
Oh
of the
my
car.
word.
That's my favorite
I
part.
can't believe that.
Wow.
I was like,
would
"Why
never.
do you love that? Like, why do you sing that song? Why do you like that song?" He's like, "Oh, I love that song because it reminds me." He's like, I've been through many hard things. Like, I had to leave one country, had to separate from my family, my friends, wonder where my next meal was going to come from, try to become a citizen. He's like, I've been through many hard things, but I know that he has stayed with me through it all. And I'm just telling you, like, here we were, like, right on the cusp of like the world completely just going haywire. And
I missed it. I missed that detail, Matthew. Was it because of COVID? Is that what was going on?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
it was March
March
12,
12th.
2020.
Okay.
And so when we talk about March of 2020, that's like right. I mean, we were all on the verge of everything shutting down, and it was just wound up being so little did I know that plane ride home was going to be me being home for quite a while. We had like 87 shows canceled, and
Wow.
it just wound up being. I sat down, I put pen to paper, and I wrote down the story of Arthur. And that story wound up sustaining me for a long time. Just God brought me back to the back seat of that Uber so many times. Usually you can't wait to get the memory of an Uber ride out of your
Yeah.
brain. But this was one of those moments where I felt like God was just showing me, like, sometimes I'm even going to use your own song to speak to you.
Wow.
Sometimes
That
the
is-
songs are for the singer too. And that's really, I felt like, man, we were entering into a season where I needed that reminder of how God's going to stay with me. And I felt like I had a lot to say. And maybe some other people needed that reminder as well of how he stays with them.
Why didn't you tell him who you were?
I don't know. I kind of like not doing that. And my dad's a pastor, and he travels with me all the time. He travels as like our pastor on the road, but he will tell everybody. Like if I'm in the back seat of a car or whatever, he'll be in the front seat. And he'll always tell the Uber, like, do you like Christian music, or do you like, It's like, well, my son is Matthew, and
Such a
he's right
dad
back
move.
there. And I always hear my dad doing that. And so whenever I'm by myself, I just don't like to tell anybody.
That's awesome.
God.
That's my favorite part,
Man,
man.
that's
It was
so
just a
cool.
special moment. And I mean, the thing is the last couple of years have been, I mean, I'm a preacher's kid, and I'll tell you something. I feel like I've perfected the art of talking about Jesus. And some days I get convicted. And when I was writing this book, and over the last couple of years with all my shows canceled, I really just felt challenged that, like, maybe I've worked harder on learning how to talk about Jesus, and in the process I've forgotten about the importance of talking with Jesus and
Man.
talking to Jesus. And so this book has been a process of a preacher's kid, a grown-up preacher's kid, maybe returning back to the basics of his faith and going like, what do I believe and why? And God just showing me that Jeremiah 29:13 is fact, that if I seek him with all my heart, I will find him. And I found him in a whole new way. And that's really what the book was about. It's a chapter by chapter reminder of how God has stayed faithful with me, patient, loving, forgiving, kind, and then how he stays away from safe spaces and how he calls us to go with him. So
Yeah.
I needed this book. And usually when it comes to music, if I'm writing a song that I needed, chances are somebody else out there needs it too. And I hope the same is true for this book.
So the book is The God Who Stays. We're on with Matthew West. He's the author of this book, but also a Christian recording artist. And so when you say that you found God in a whole new way, like, how would you describe the whole new way part?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of like I talk a lot about being a professional Christian. Like, I've gotten, there's another song of mine called Truth Be Told. And it's really from the perspective of like, look, I learned at a young age how to look the part, how to, like, if I was in the front row as the preacher's kid, if I raised my hand during the slow song, I knew all the other parents would nudge their kid, like, why can't you be more like Matthew? You know what I mean? Like, I know how to look the part. I know how to quote the scriptures, and my spiritual life could be in critical condition, and I could still be up on stage projecting a really strong ministry. You know what I mean? And so I think this book really helped me. Like, I compare it in the book to being like, have I become the equivalent of a personal trainer who can't do a push-up?
Whoa.
You know what I mean? Like, I want to be diving in on my personal faith and my journey, and like having a new hunger for scripture, and just not just looking the part, but living it. And so I think that's one of the main kind of ways in, where for me, having all those concerts canceled and having less opportunity to talk about Jesus from the stage forced me to take some inventory off the stage and say, God, forgive me. Like, I know you're seeking a relationship with me, and I'm spending more of my time seeking a platform about you. And I need to reverse those things. And I kept coming back to, like, even hymns that I sang as a little kid. There's a hymn, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And I started thinking about in Genesis how God went looking for Adam and Eve in the cool of the day to go for a walk with them. And I started thinking about, like, man, during the pandemic, I would go for these walks.
Yes.
And do you ever go for a walk with somebody you don't like? No. I would go for a walk with my wife, and we'd have these amazing conversations. I was thinking, like, is that the relationship you want with me, God? And am I like Adam and Eve? You went looking for him to go for a walk, and they hid from you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's a lot of things that make us hide: our sin, our shame, our busyness. And I don't know. It was just an opportunity for me to say, God, I don't want to hide from you. I know you want to go for a walk with me, and I want to know you more and on a deeper level.
Yeah, man, that's great.
That's so good.
So I've got a question. So this week it was announced that Taylor Swift is releasing a new album. And I was like,
Midnights.
Called Midnights. And I was like, how in the world does she still have something to say? It's like she's already recorded everything. So, like, how do you do that? You've been doing this for a long time now. I'm not saying you're old, but you've been doing it for a while. So it's like, how do you still have, like, new songs to write?
That's a great question. I think a lot of my songs are inspired by people's stories. Several years ago, I had surgery on my vocal cords. And it wound up like being, I mean, the things we go through are blessings. We just don't see them at the time. But it was a big battle in my life. It was the first time. The pandemic wasn't the only time where my touring life came to a standstill. This surgery on my throat really shut me down. And through that, I felt like, I don't know how to explain it, but I just kept writing. When God gives me my voice back, I'm going to use my voice to give a voice to others. And it wasn't if he gives me my voice back, it was when. And I had this idea coming out of that own trial in my story of, what if I collected other people's stories? And what if I went to the people who listen to my music and said, you tell me what to write about? I'm sure, Jonathan, you as a pastor, I've always thought, and maybe I have the heart of a pastor because my dad is one, but if a pastor or a youth pastor just said anonymously to their congregation, tell me your story, you tell me what's going on in your life, we would never have to wonder what we should be preaching or writing songs about, right? There's a deep well, because these people are carrying stuff that they don't feel like they can share with anybody else.
That's right.
So all these years later, I've collected thousands of people's testimonies and stories, and a lot of them tell me anonymously. And so actually I have a song that starts Dear Anonymous, because so many stories I've received are just people setting their secret free or talking about a broken chapter of their story. So that, to answer your question, I think it's a deep well because there's stories all around us. And I think the job of a songwriter or a pastor, any kind of, an author or music maker, content creators, you got to have your antennas up, your eyes open to see the stories at work all around you. And then, my goal, I feel like, is to try to write songs of redemption for the broken chapters of our stories. And man, there's no end to that deep well.
Great.
I was in Urban Outfitters once, and they have the tables set out, and they have books on the tables, and one of the books was called Post Secrets, and the whole
you would send in your postcards with your secrets on it.
That's right.
Yes.
And they would turn it into a book, and so it's all of these people publicly confessing things that we're anonymous. And I read that through the lens of a fairly new Christian at the time. And I was just like, man, like, I think freedom is like, I don't care who knows. Like, this is who I am. This is what I've done, and I don't care who knows. And I've been talking a lot about that lately, and just like, man, the world is such a weird place right now, with like the mob mentality and the cancel culture, and like even with the staff this morning, I was realizing a trend on Instagram is I'll post something, right, and it's not like super controversial in nature, but it is a stance. Like, I'll post a stance on something, and all of my followers will see it, and they'll share it, and they'll like it, and they'll comment like, man, this is great, this made me love Jesus more, thanks for sharing truth, it's something great. But then it will go out to people, they'll share it, so it'll go out to them, and then about 48 hours will be the backlash, because it will go beyond my followers, and then the other people will see it, and then they'll come on, and they'll just, this is garbage, this is trash, you're a poor excuse for a human being, you're wasting breath, your mom should have had an abortion, and just say like hateful things. And I'm like, man, like what's wrong with society today? And I know, like, as you into this book, The God Who Stays, we're with Matthew West. The book is The God Who Stays. I commend it to you just based on the story that he shared out the gate alone. But how I think you address some of that, of just kind of cancel culture and whatnot. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny that you said, like, you receive that wave of support from the people who are like-minded, and then that secondary wave of,
that's right.
And what you said, like, I'm gonna guess that some of the criticism you just like listed off was not you weren't just making that up. Those weren't hypothetical criticisms. Those were actual.
Yeah.
And I've received the brunt of that as well. Like, in the book I talk about, I wrote a song called "Modest is Hottest" that I put out during the pandemic. Now, I have to say, like, if anybody listens to my music for any amount of time, like, I don't take myself too seriously. A lot of Christian music can be, pretty heavy or serious in nature. But during the pandemic, I really felt like, here's one thing I learned. Like, God is not one dimensional, and neither are the things he creates. And so, the world was talking about pivoting all through the last couple of years, but it was like, for me, I was just realizing, like, sometimes I'm going to write a book. Sometimes I'm going to write a song. Sometimes I'm going to write a stupid song, a goofy one, just to put a laugh and smile on people's faces. And so I did that during the pandemic. And I put out a song called "Modest is Hottest," and really sort of naively, just unknowingly stepped into this whole, like, this conversation about purity culture and people saying they were triggered. And I had the onslaught of the mob come after me, which, for a statement that was clearly satire, it was actually a song poking fun at a dad of daughters who's trying to, like, be overprotective or whatever. But the songs was kind of rooted in good values and saying, like, hey, you don't have to flaunt your body to a Cardi B song on TikTok in order to find acceptance in this world. Right. Well, who would have thought that was a controversial statement? But man, they were saying all sorts of evil things. And I, for about a week, I thought my career was over, all these things. Wow. But I'm just going to tell you, man, it brought me through this to realize, okay, speaking of the God who stays, guess who I know was with me every step of that way, even if it felt like, because at a certain point I was angering all of the non-Christians and the left, the people who were really just anti any moral whatever. Like, the idea of purity was just evil to them, which is that. And then I was upsetting all the Christians because I wasn't using this as some sort of a political stand. Right. And I started to realize, okay, who is my audience? Yeah. And God forgive me for forgetting that I have an audience of one. And so I really kind of came through that stronger, realizing that, as much as I love talking with you guys, Jonathan, and your listeners, they're not my audience. Yeah. As much as I love making music and hearing them applaud, that's not who I'm out to please either. Yeah. And I really do have an audience of one. I'm curious, though, Jonathan, you said, tell me, like, when did you become a Christian? Was it later in life?
20 years ago. So, I was raised in the church. I went to Catholic school for 9 years, and then I partied in college. They say drug, sex, and rock and roll is drug, sex, and hip hop. And then I was at a club 20 years ago, and somebody invited me to a church. I went hungover, and long story short, surrendered my life to Jesus, trusted in his death and resurrection for the forgiveness of sins. And And then everything in my life began to pretty radically change after that. And about 4.5 years, 5 years later, I went into vocational ministry. And so, yeah.
Do you feel like with your journey, because I noticed that you guys, like, you're not afraid, like you said, you're not trying to be controversial, but you're also not afraid to make a stand and make a stance and communicate that via social media, even if that second wave of hate comes your way. What makes you guys unafraid to tackle those topics and maybe give the unpopular opinion? Like, what is it about? Is it your background that has prepared you for that? Is it coming to know Jesus later as opposed to being raised in the church? What do you feel like has prepared you for that?
It's a responsibility. I mean, it's a terrible privilege, is what I would say. And Galatians 1:10. Am I now trying to win the approval of God or men? Am I trying to please men? For if I'm trying to please men or mankind, people, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. And so, like you said, the way you phrased that is audience of one. It's like, man, at the end of the day, I'm going to stand before my maker, my creator, and I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. He's going to say that because of Jesus. Like, I get it. It's Jesus' righteousness. But because of Jesus' righteousness and because I have eternal life, like, I can walk faithfully and courageously. And it's the reason I think this is important because, and I want to tie all this together, like, as you talk about purity culture, like, all we do is we just swing the pendulum back and forth. Like, hey, purity is good, and you should remain pure till marriage. Wait, remaining pure until marriage, that message has caused me to have body image issues and insecurities and misogynistic realities and ideologies. And it's like, whoa. So purity's bad. Well, no, purity's not bad. Like, we have to keep the message central to the gospel, central to the scriptures. And when you do that, sometimes you're attacked by both sides. And the message is there are sides, right? There are sides. So what happens if one side comes after you, then the other side says, hey, we'll protect you. Come over here, and then the temptation is to say, okay, well, fine. Well, I'll just come over here, and this is now my camp now. And and I think we have to stay in this place where it's like, no, I see wisdom and truth. And right, I understand why this message has made you feel that way. And yet some of that is you listening to it through your experience, right? And it doesn't mean the message is wrong. And so we need to reframe your experience, help you heal through your experience, and not go all the way over here. And if you do that well, at times both sides are going to hate you. Both sides are going to come after you. It sounds like you did that well.
Well, I'd be the last one to admit if I did it well. I know I've screwed up a lot of things in my life at different times, and that was one situation where I fully felt unprepared and somewhat naive because I didn't realize the conversation I was stepping into. But I heard that word trigger from so many people, and when I started, and I will say this, it's interesting you mentioned that, Jonathan, because it's like there was a temptation for me because I knew I could see this side rising up to defend me. Mm-hmm. And there was a tendency for me to go, like, I had all these news outlets that wanted to interview me, and they were and I was gonna have a chance to, like, have this army rise up under me and support. And it was like, I could have left the song up and I probably could have paid for my kids' college. That's the irony.
Wow.
The song that they were saying was, but I felt this tendency to go, okay, well, let's let my mob come up and defend me because that feels good. Yeah. But I just think at the end of the day, I wrote this song for a record I'm working on called Kingdom Things. And it's literally just about me coming back to, like, I want to, like, hold everything up to this light. Like, okay, in the light of eternity, is this pointing to you? Is this a kingdom thing?
So good.
Or kingdom business or whatever it is? And that's where I was like, I want to get back to, like, doing something that's going to point people to Jesus. Yeah. I'm not afraid to be divisive, and I'm not afraid to make a stance, but I'm also not going to fall so in love with the supportive response from some stance that becomes my mob or my army. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning. I'm a work in progress, but I've also learned that as a follower of Christ, and this is what I love in the clips that I've been watching that you guys post, you're helping to equip followers of Christ to give a defense for their faith, to understand, like you said, that word purity. Let's not let that word itself become soiled because of people's experiences or maybe how it's been communicated poorly in the past. there's still so much truth to the word purity. And as a father of 2 daughters, you better believe all day long that I'm still going to be giving them that message. Hey, you don't have to undress on TikTok. You don't have to do this. Like, and so I think the biblical values are there. We have to be unafraid to make a stance, but we also have to be educated and prepared to give defense for our faith.
Yeah.
That's so good.
You want to say something?
Well, I was going to ask a question.
Go for it.
Can I?
Yeah, of course.
Well,
All right, ask me.
I'm talking long answers.
No,
this is awesome. I
love it. I don't want to turn the direction, but I kind of do because it sounds like, just hearing bits and pieces of your story, that you've gone through moments where life hasn't gone the way that you wanted it to. Obviously, COVID, obviously canceled with the song Modest is Hottest. Even when you had your voice surgery, I think you like broke your arm too at some point in your past. Super fan over here. Anyways, all that to say is, like, I feel like the message of this book can really resonate with our listeners because they're in their 20s and 30s. They're getting out into their first jobs, first relationships. They have all these high expectations, and then life just doesn't go the way that they are thinking it's going to. What encouragement would you have for them?
Well, it's a great question. And really, the book is a chapter by chapter kind of deeper dive into all of the ways that God stays faithful in our lives and how he stays with us. As the song says, when the whole world walks away, you're the God who stays. And I know it's like, I like to think when I'm hitting my mark as a songwriter, I'm saying something simply profound. Like, it's simple, and that's the message of the gospel, is it's simply profound. And really what I start to dive in through this book and over the last couple of years of my personal life is realizing that the whole message of the gospel is the message of pursuit, of a God who chases after us, and nothing will stop him from leaving the 99 to continue to find the one. For that person who's had the door closed, the dream deferred, or delayed, or things not working out the way that they planned, there's a chapter called God Stays with the Plan. And that realization that his plans are not thwarted or thrown off because your life hasn't gone the way you thought it would. In fact, one of the things that I talk about is how a lot of times when we talk about the stories of our lives, we'll focus on, okay, what's the best thing that ever happened to you? Like, the best thing that ever happened. But in this book, I talk a lot about the best things that never happened to me.
That's good.
And that's just me being a goofy songwriter, like, in plays on words and stuff. But these subtle changes of, like, okay, what about the dream that didn't come true? And look at how that was used by God to lead me exactly and precisely where he wanted me to be. So much of my story has been the stubborn Saul who has to get knocked off a donkey before he sees the light. It's the me who's determined to chase my will and my plan for my life, and then turn around and seek God's stamp of approval after. And that's not how it works. And so I can look back over the course of my story, and time is such a beautiful gift where we can look back and see, oh man, I'm so glad that door closed. I'm so glad that that I faced that rejection, because I've learned that rejection is never rejection when I know who's really writing my story. It's always, get ready. I've got something better for you than you can even see. So I hope that message, especially for your listeners today, if they're facing that, why isn't this going the way I want it to? I'm telling you what, he knows the plans he has for you, not you know. And here's the best part about that. He knows the plans he has for you, not he had for you, not past tense, but present tense. He sees the best of your story still ahead of you. It may not be looking how you wanted it to go right now, but if you will seek his will for your life above all else, Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things, meaning all these things that he has for you, they will be added unto you. And so God stays with the plan. It may not be yours, but his is better.
That's so good.
I love it. Matthew 6:33 is my life verse. And
come on,
sometimes I'm driving down the road and I'm just like, man, it's like I wake up from this dream and I'm like, I live in Waco. Like, how did this happen? And that's not saying anything disparaging about Waco. I love Waco, but I'm like, how did I get here? Like, God has never told me his 5-year plan for my life, right? And he wants us to walk by faith. Like, and walking by faith is not being able to see around the corner. It's putting one foot in front of the other, saying, hey, God, I trust you. I don't know the 5-year plan, but I know that you know the 5-year plan. So I'm going to walk in that. The book is The God Who Stays by Matthew West. You can get it anywhere and everywhere books are sold. It's out. Get it. It'll be there. Amazon Prime, 2-day shipping. Anywhere specifically you'd like to send to Matthew West?
It's not actually out yet.
Oh, it'll be out.
Oh,
Kathy.
by the time this
It'll
comes
be
out.
out.
Dadgummit. I thought I knew something you didn't know.
You know, one of the things I did was a chapter by chapter, like guided tour of the book. Like if you want to hear me kind of share a little bit of the heart, like behind each chapter, at thegodwhostays.com, you can get access to some of those kind of extras. You know, I think the way that me writing books started was I would finish writing a song and feel like, man, I got more to unpack here. And maybe that's how you guys feel with this podcast. Cause I know you might share a message on Sunday and go, wait, we can go deeper here.
Go 2 more hours. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. So, and that's how I feel chatting with you guys. This has been fun, but yeah, so they can check that out at thegodwhostays.com. But I'm just excited, man. I feel like what the Lord's doing in my life is, I'm just thankful, and I want to have a closer walk with him every day and realize that the success of my ministry is all going to hinge on the quality of my time spent with the Lord behind closed doors. And as I say that, it challenges me, and I hope it challenges anybody else out there who's listening.
Well, I mean, you said something that scares me, and it's that phrase "professional Christian." Yeah. It's like we us three talk about that all the time, because it's like I'm terrified of getting to that point where I'm just saying all the right things and I'm not actually living with Jesus. And like your job is to perform. Like you perform all the time. But what are some of those things that make sure you're not actually just performing, like you're actually living in it? I know you talked about it a little bit, but is that like time in the Word? Is that community? What is that for you?
It's dangerous territory when you get to that point where you're way more focused on I mean the Bible's very clear about it, right? It may not say in the life of a podcast host or in the life of in the life of a singer, but in every single one of our lives there's going to be that tendency to see the sign on the door say come as you are, but then we think it's something other, we live something other than that. For some reason, walking inside the doors of a church or having that title as a follower of Christ can bring with it the pressure to project perfection. And man, it's like, but yet when I'm more vulnerable in my songwriting, when I'm at my most honest, when I'm writing the book, that tends to be what resonates the most with people. So it's ironic because we can encourage people to, hey, be authentic, you know, but there's a reason why books like that Post Secret that you mentioned earlier exist, because people don't feel like they have a safe place to be honest and real. I will say, just to answer your question, like, I think the challenge for me is my personal time spent with the Lord and having accountability around me, like, is so essential. And if those two things are suffering in my life, it's no secret where my life can go, or any of our lives can go. And so I think for me, there's an old book I read by Jim Cymbala, who's a pastor of Brooklyn Tabernacle.
It's called Fresh Fire.
Yeah, you know that book. Yeah. And man, I find myself returning back to that book. And sometimes my prayers have to start with, God, give me a desire today to spend time with you, and then not be ashamed by that prayer, because Satan wants to make me ashamed that I have to pray for a renewed desire to open my Bible today. But sometimes, if I'm being honest, if I get up on stage and sing a song called Truth Be Told, but then never do that, what the heck? That's exactly where the enemy wants me, Matthew West. He wants me to be singing one thing and living another, and I have to fight out of that as hard as I can. And so sometimes it is, Lord, here I am. I got a million thoughts in my head. I'm really too busy for this today. And I know how insane that statement even is, because I can't be too busy to take care of first things first. So help me open my Bible. Help me stay focused. And I believe that there's grace for prayers like that. And I believe there's grace for prayers of those prayers, because I'm one of them.
Man, you are a brother from another mother.
Gosh,
I know.
So
Seriously.
I'm like, man, we got to swap cell phones. Hey, the book is The God Who Stays. We're on with Matthew West. I am so glad we did not have Kanye West on today.
Me too.
Because
next week. I'll make a phone call. I'll make a phone call.
Call a cousin.
Call your cousin.
But man, thanks for jumping on with us. This has been awesome, and so thankful to hear some of the story. Can't wait to read this book. So it's awesome.
I never answered. You said who's the most famous person in your phone?
Yeah.
And I never really answered the question because I was trying to think. But it's like
Annie F. Downs.
I do have Annie. I was just thinking, like, let's prank call some. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I am so down for that.
One time on my podcast, I was like, I'm gonna prank call a celebrity.
Yeah. That's what we did. We did that
tried
in
to do that
COVID.
before.
In COVID, we did quarantine cold calls, and we would just call people. It was like, hey, let's just figure out who's in your phone. Let's just call them. So we were just calling people.
I love it. I
Y'all are
love
the
it. Well,
same.
Shane B was in the bathroom, I think, when we called him.
oh, that's amazing.
I think we called Annie too.
Yeah, we did. We did call him.
I was some names. It depends on the circle, like how famous other people would think they are. Like for me, the fact that like Michael W. Smith is in my phone, that's kind of what my childhood was. But maybe some of your listeners be like, "Who's that?"
What
I don't
about
know.
Toby Mac?
I got Toby Mac.
Oh man, Mac West and Toby Mac are like right here for me.
Wow.
Well, he's probably got 2 numbers though. I guarantee you, I'm in like one.
Yeah.
I don't have. There's probably a real one and
Yeah.
then a. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I love it, my
I
guy.
got just one number. So here, let me put it in. Let me give you my
Aw.
number. If
This is a sweet moment.
you guys ever need anything, do you have access to the chat part or no?
I don't, but
So
we'll
we
get it
actually
afterwards.
need a good worship leader. The one right now is just
Oh my
like he's
gosh.
fine.
Stop it.
I love it. I love it. No,
So you want me to come to Waco?
Yeah,
Yes,
we would
bring
love
your
you to
bring
come
your
to Waco.
daughter, and we'll take good care of her.
And are you? So you're a girl dad. You have more than one daughter.
Yeah, I have 2 daughters.
That's
yeah,
right. I have 2 daughters as well. How old are you?
Do you really?
Yeah.
So we really are brothers from another mother. I'm 45, and I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old.
I have 15 and 13.
That's crazy.
15 and 13,
Dang!
yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah, man.
it's
That's
the
wild.
best. I will say, I just took them to the beach for a couple days just to kind of get some time with them. But like, I felt like the third wheel on a girls' trip because
Yeah.
I told my wife, I was like, I'm so lonely right now. I need
Yeah.
somebody to go football with me. They're just
Oh my
reading their
gosh.
beach reads and like going shopping and
Yeah,
getting their
yeah.
nails done. I'm like, this is my job. I just pay. I'm
Hey,
Hey,
paid.
I will
Yeah.
go on vacation with
Yeah.
you whenever
Oh
you
my
want.
gosh.
Holler at your boy.
No, that wasn't an invite.
It's good clarification.
Yes.
That's good because he thought it was.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, I'm ready.
I promise.
I'll throw a football on the beach with
I
Matthew West.
promise. Hey, I love it, man. We gotta shut it down. But I truly could go 2 more hours. The book is The God Who Stays. We're on with Matthew West. Get it everywhere books are sold. I'm truly, like, genuinely excited to read it. So,
Thank you guys.
hey, thank you so much for being on with us.
Thanks. We'll see
Hey,
you soon.
anytime, man. You guys keep up the good work. We'll look forward to talking soon.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. To find out more, visit becomingsomething.com.